You are now listening to
Chakras and Shotguns. Welcome to Chakras and Shotguns, the podcast that guides you on a journey of spiritual development and personal preparedness. I'm Jenn, a former lawyer, yogi, and human design lover.
And I'm Mik, a marketer, energy healer, and prepper.
So what would you do if you had more time, if you had more hours in the day? Would you work out, eat better? Would you be like me and just take a nap? Today, we're talking about time, what it is, how we perceive it, and how we can better utilize the time that we have.
One quick thing, though, before we get into time, we wanted to remind our listeners about our partnership with Magic Mind.
Yes, if you missed our episode last week, Mik and I recently tried Magic Mind. It's a 2-ounce boost of energy that contains matcha, adaptogens, mushrooms, and other natural ingredients.
Chakras and Shotguns listeners can enjoy discounts on Magic Mind by going to magicmind.co/shotguns, SHAKGUNS, and using that code shotguns, SHAKGUNS, and you will get a 20% off of a single purchase and up to 56% off of a subscription plan. All depends on how much you order. The subscription discount code has been extended and is now good through the end of January, so hop on it.
All right, so not to play on Magic Mind, but let's get our minds right. Let's get into some breath work, yes? Today's breath work is about being present. We've done that before, but I thought it was especially prescient, appropriate to do that with the topic of today's episode. And it's always a good refresher to remember to be present. You don't do one 30-second breath work and then all of a sudden you're like, I live in the now. So it is a practice. Show yourselves grace. But if you can, find a comfortable seat and let's get started. So let's start with our 3 breaths together. Inhale in through your nose, expanding your belly, filling your body up with air. Holding at the top, and then exhale that breath out through the mouth, emptying your body completely of air and any negativity. Let's do that again. Inhale in through your nose, maybe sit up a little straighter. Rolling your shoulders up to your ears, down your back. You're holding that breath at the top, and let's exhale that breath back out through the mouth. Last breath together. Inhale in through your nose. Maybe relax your jaw. Maybe smile a little bit. And this time we're going to seal the lips and exhale that breath back out through our nose. And now that we're aware of our breath, that we've released tension from our bodies, I would like to challenge you to not think about what's next. Not think about what's on your to-do list, what errand you need to run next, what thing you need to accomplish, what plans you have for tomorrow or the weekend or next month. And just focus on the stillness, being conscious of your body if you need to point your attention somewhere. Enjoying this moment that you've allowed yourself to be still, to be present, to be in the present. And I know a lot of us can be forward focused. What's next? What do I have to do? Where am I going? But sometimes we also can get stuck in the past. What conversations are we replaying in our head? What regrets do we have? What do we wish we did different? And just taking this moment is a reminder that you're here in this moment. And this is the moment that you have. All right. I was trying not to give the whole episode away in that breath work, but let's get into the main topic.
It was great, Jen. Thanks so much. So yeah, today we're talking about time. As Jen mentioned, we're going to jump into the fourth dimension. All things timelines. All that fun stuff.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to do. What was that, the Twilight Zone?
Yep.
We're kind of getting into that. But what is time and how do we perceive it? Why does time fly by on vacation? But why does it then move so slowly when you're at work? Why is that? And before starting on this spiritual journey, I really didn't think that much about time. Not in the sense of like, what is time? Maybe I didn't have enough time to think about time. I don't know. But I do remember that I always rolled my eyes at the saying that you have the same 24 hours in a day as Beyonce, because that is a lie. Because Beyonce has a chef and a personal trainer and a manager and an assistant and a house manager and a nanny. Okay. Nannies, probably. She gets more out of her day than the beehive does, perhaps. But outside of that, I've always been a sci-fi and fantasy lover. It's actually one of the things Mik and I found in common with each other when we first started dating. And
yeah, I was like, ooh, look at that sexy nerd over there.
Oh my gosh. Why am I covering my face like I'm embarrassed? We're married with 2 kids. But all of that to say, even though I love sci-fi, I have always hated time as a theme. Like whenever it comes up in movies, I was like, oh, hell. Now I got to follow that they jumping around in the timeline. And well, what does this mean? And who's going where? And who's going when? And yeah, the ones that have messed me up were Interstellar, Looper, Tenet. But I think you loved all of those.
I loved all those movies. I think I enjoy the mental rabbit hole that you end up having to go down in those movies. I even think about Butterfly Effect. That one, I don't know if that one was as popular as some of these other ones, but Butterfly Effect was slept on. It had a lot of really cool elements to it, like how like one small thing could have all these rippling effects across the timeline. I just like would sit down and think about how my life could unfold if I like thought about it from a Butterfly Effect standpoint. So I love that one. Even Inception. It's about dreams, but how like time moved at different rates the deeper you went into the dream. I just like loved like thinking about that. And the classic Back to the Future, one of my favorites growing up.
Okay. Sounds like you had a lot of time to think about that.
Nah, but also if you're like a Marvel fan like we are, that's a big part of like what they've been doing recently, right? Doctor Strange, she's manipulating time, how they eventually went back and, spoiler alert, killed Thanos. If you haven't seen that, my bad.
It's only been out for like 4 years. Okay.
Maybe some people are doing a binge right now.
Oh, they're trying to catch up.
I don't know.
Fine.
You know, Wakanda Forever came out. Maybe folks was trying to catch up. So anyway, that's a big theme across Marvel. So I enjoy it.
I think for me, it's the paradoxes. Like if a man goes back in time, or a woman, let's not be sexist, and kills their grandfather, fun, before the grandfather got married and had their child, and then that child was able to have that person, the murderer, does the killer cease to exist? Do you just like disintegrate, or does the jumping back is that all just a part of the same timeline now? How does time work?
I hear you. And I don't know if I have a great answer for you, but we can start by just talking about what time is. So Neil deGrasse Tyson, one of our faves, he had a couple videos specifically talking about that. And what he said was we recognize time because of certain things repeating at certain intervals. So our first acknowledgement of time is the sun rising and setting due to the Earth's rotation, the different phases of the moon that happened, and the 4 seasons, etc. Right? From a physics standpoint, time is part of an equation to localize where you are. It's like a coordinate. You know, we all took algebra and map things XY axis given coordinates.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, time is one of those coordinates. And you've never been at a place without a time, and you've never been at a time without a place. So space and time are essentially those X and Y axes, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to meet somewhere, I'm not going to say, hey, let's meet at the park and not give you a time. And I'm not going to say, let's meet at 3:30 and not give you a place, right? So they're intertwined.
They go together.
Real bad.
Okay, Carisha. If we haven't lost you already, I wanted to talk about this video. Again, another one from Neil deGrasse Tyson. He was talking about how we perceive the dimensions. So dimensions has a lot to do with time. So 2D, that's a drawing on a piece of paper, a stick figure. That stick figure cannot perceive a Rubik's Cube, which is a 3D object. And that Rubik's Cube couldn't perceive being on an airplane for a 4 p.m. departure. But we can perceive each of those things. So we can, I hope, be on your plane on time. And so we're in the 4th dimension. We can see, touch, interact with the Rubik's Cube. We can draw the 2D image on a piece of paper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's like as advanced as it gets for us, right? We can perceive the 4th dimension, but we can't actually do anything to manipulate it, right? So we experience time as linear, as one thing happens and the next, et cetera, right? You know, past, present, future. We can only have an experience at one specific moment in time. And Neil deGrasse Tyson calls that being a prisoner of the present.
So let's jump into the multiverse, shall we? Which is real. In quantum mechanics, scientists have been able to prove that subatomic particles can exist in different states all at the same time. But whenever we look, we can only observe the particles in one state. So from those experiments, they have expanded this into what is known as the many worlds theory, and that moment by moment, a different outcome branches off into another reality and another until it's infinite parallel realities all existing without knowledge of the other. But just like the scientists observing the subatomic particles, we can only observe this timeline that we're currently in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've talked about this before, and there's a timeline where I'm a orthodontist, and there's a timeline where I only speak Italian, right?
Buongiorno.
Exactly. There's a timeline where I choose to wear a red shirt today, even though I'm wearing a gray one right now. A movie that we saw recently that I think really illustrates this, and I really love it, and I think they won some awards recently in an award season, but it's called Everything Everywhere All at Once. If you have not seen that movie, definitely check that out. Without spoiling anything, basically there's this woman, she's running a laundromat, and she's kind of cranky in her relationships with her family, and she's got this, kind of mundane job, and basically she jumps and experiences different timelines in an effort to save the multiverse.
And in Interstellar, what you think is a space movie ends up being a space and time movie, and it brings into question, what is it like to experience higher dimensions? Because that's what's revealed at the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, we wouldn't perceive time as linear. Remember the example, the 2D drawing, the Rubik's Cube. If we were able to go to a 5th or 6th or 7th, whatever dimension, we would not experience time how we experience time as linear. We would see the whole timeline laid out and happening all at the same time, and be able to jump in at will.
Mm-hmm.
Just like I'm able to pick up a Rubik's Cube and throw it across the room.
Yeah.
we would also be able to interact with time in a completely different way. So Neil deGrasse Tyson has a great explanation of the Interstellar movie, and we'll link that one in the show notes.
Yeah, that's super cool how he breaks that down. I also think about that other movie, I think it's called Arrival.
Mm-hmm.
And they experience, well, the main character interacts with extraterrestrials and their perception of time is different from ours. Instead of linear, they experience it circularly. And so it's almost like the same idea, everything all at once at the same time. And this extraterrestrial race, that is how they perceive time, like normally. And so it's super cool to just like, it bends your mind to think that there's other ways to perceive time because we've only been conditioned to believe that this is the only way to experience time, right?
There's something not quite time related, but really cool about what you just said there about how the extraterrestrial race perceives time normally to them. And it's just a really interesting exercise of how you can examine anything that's quote unquote normal to you and kind of remove yourself out of that and say, okay, why is this normal to me? What's normal to someone else? Just a interesting perspective.
Yeah. So moving on, I think there's some interesting technology out there that we've been as a human race experimenting with that calls to mind some things that we see in movies like time machines, right? Or sophisticated spaceships that can help us to experience time differently. There's an organization that is actually doing this work. It's called CERN. It's a French acronym that translates into the European Organization for Nuclear Research. They were founded in 1952 with the mandate to create world-class fundamental physics research in Europe. One of the biggest projects that they're known for is the Large Hadron Collider. This machine basically takes different kinds of particles and speeds them up really fast, almost at the speed of light, and collides them with other particles, and then they just see what happens.
I kind of love that. It's just like, let's go boom. Let's see what happens.
It's like childlike wonders, like what our kids do. They just like pull things off of shelves and watch them fall and see what happens.
They turned the machine on once in 2012. It ran again from 2015 to 2018, and then they just turned it on again last summer in July 2022. And it's going to run, since July 2022, it's going to run 24/7 until 2026. So if you slipped and fell into spirituality TikTok like I did, it was all over TikTok, okay? People were like preparing for the collider to come on. They were abstaining from drugs and alcohol, telling people to keep their vibrations high and positive and to be very intentional about what you want out of life. And they were saying all of this because there was a thought that each time CERN turned on the machine, we jumped or collapsed timelines. So that things were shifting. They're like, we were kind of on this timeline and then we jumped into another one. Some even blame the collider for Trump getting elected. Like we jumped to a shittier timeline. I don't know. I don't know. Exploring all these things, you're always scared that you're going to slip into some crazy conspiracy theory. But there's some things that people think are conspiracies that are quite true.
Yeah.
But how did you feel about that theory? What did you think about?
It's interesting. Like I don't know if I fully buy into like this idea that CERN can affect the timeline, but I said a big but. I think about our July 2022 and what transpired. We completely moved our entire life to California. Like there's a timeline somewhere where we stay in our nice suburban Dallas home and keep our comfortable, corporate jobs and don't ever really go down this route that we're on now, right? And so we literally jumped timelines in July 2022. I don't know if that was CERN or if that was some other force that just led us here.
But that is interesting. And I think the thing about conspiracies that's terrifying and fascinating to me is if they were opening up black holes and collapsing timelines and doing all this other shit, would they tell us? No, I wouldn't tell you either. I wouldn't tell you nothing.
You think Stan Lee knows? That's why you start writing on these comics.
I think that Stan Lee and a lot of comic book authors were doing a lot of drugs, and we'll have to do an episode on psychedelics because I am fascinated by it, and I think that we can attribute a lot of creative and scientific advancement from things like LSD and mushrooms. But we'll talk about that another day.
All right.
I will say this. We kind of bought into it, like they were turning on the collider or whatever, and we did stop drinking for like a couple of days or whatever. It was like a week.
I forgot about that.
And I mean, I was like, well, I don't feel any different, but did it hurt?
Because I think the whole thing was like, if you need to stop drinking so that you can like vibrate at your highest level, so that you can attract the timeline that is for your highest good, right? There was all this conversation around it. We were at dinner with like a couple of friends, and we were talking about it at the table, and like the waiters overheard us, and they're like, "Are you guys talking about CERN and the new timeline?"
Yeah.
It was hilarious. But anyway, let's get to some fun stuff related to time. And that's the Mandela Effect. For those of you who do not know what the Mandela Effect is, it's basically a term for collective false memories. Basically, a large group of people, they remember something as actually happening, but it never happened. Or did it? It got its name because there were a lot of people who believed that Nelson Mandela, the South African activist, former president, died in prison, when in actuality he was in prison for 27 years, was released in 1990, and became president of South Africa in 1994. He later died when he was 95 years old. But there was still this memory out there of him dying in prison.
And it's like not connected. It's not like, oh no, my whole family thought this. It was like, no, I was talking to somebody random and they were like, no, Nelson Mandela died. Like, and you're like, why do you think that? So other examples are the spelling of the children's book series Berenstain Bears. I grew up with Berenstain. That's me. How to spell Chick-fil-A? Is it Chick? Is it Chik?
So Berenstain, is it not Berenstain? Or
it's Berenstain, EIN.
Okay, so we're having a Mandela Effect moment right now because I actually don't know what the real one is. And I read all those books as a kid, but I'll take your word for it.
I can see it in the print and it's AIN at the end.
Yeah, I don't know. All right.
My personal favorite is the Ed McMahon Mandela Effect because people, including me, swear that Ed McMahon was the man who brought the check to your door from Publishers Clearinghouse. He never, he never worked with Publishers Clearinghouse. Okay?
You got to Google it because I had to Google it too. Google it, you will see he did not work for them because I thought for sure he was delivering checks.
And baby, I bet you remember the commercials. That did not happen. Okay? It's popped up in pop culture on different shows. It was on an episode of Golden Girls, and people swear they remember him telling people to enter the sweepstakes and win, and it never happened, at least in this timeline that we're currently in.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about that, right? Like some of the spirituality of time and jumping timelines. We said earlier that Neil deGrasse Tyson thinks that humans are prisoners of the present. So let's reframe that a little bit. Think on the breath work that we opened with. And that can be freeing. We're only in control of this exact moment. We can't control the past. We can't really control what happens next. No matter how much thought we planned ahead, right? We're only in the present. A great book on this that I love, Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. It's an awesome book. Just to kind of summarize it, he basically says pretty much what Jen said in her breath work. You can really only exist in this exact moment. The past is a memory and the future hasn't happened yet. So why shift your focus away from experiencing the present when you're thinking about the future, right? Let's not sacrifice our present for something that hasn't happened yet or for something that is already gone, right? And there's a lot of psychological concepts and things that he kind of discusses in the book that I think can help you to be more present. And he talks about the freedom that comes with existing and living and fully embracing the present. So great book, especially if you're early in your spiritual journey, even if you're really far along. I think it's really just a well-written book and kind of can get you on the right track when it comes to your mindset.
And then I think that's That's the crux of the mindfulness movement too, right? About being mindful in every little moment. It's about being present. So also think about it, if you were a fifth or above dimensional being, and you could perceive time as everything happening at once, why would you worry about the future at all? It's all laid out exactly how it's supposed to unfold, including the moment where you're worrying about what you're going to have for dinner tonight, or you're thinking about your old boo and how they did you wrong and you should have cussed them out that third time instead of waiting until the seventh. And like, that's already laid out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how you would perceive it. And so I thought that was very freeing from the standpoint that I can go with the flow of this moment, be in this moment. I can still make plans. I can still work hard on what I want to work on, but it gets you off the hook of the worry and the swirling, because I can swirl on the past in particular. And so you get to be in the moment, feel the full spectrum of human emotion in this moment, knowing that the future is going to unfold how it's supposed to. And that doesn't mean that you're no longer an active role player in your life. It doesn't mean that you don't have dreams or aspirations. It means that you focus on the present and you put your attention and your work into the present, because the choices that you make in the present will hopefully unfold into the future that you're seeking to create.
Yeah, that gets into like questions of like free will, right? Like, if everything is already laid out, already exists, it's happening everywhere all at once, how do my choices impact things? It's one of those things that I don't even think that our construction, like the construction of our actual mind, is able to even fully comprehend because of the way in which we experience linear time.
Exactly. Because I could say, let's say I had a reading with Melanie Esperon. Love her. And she was like, okay, Jennifer, she doesn't ever get this specific, but if she was like, on January 24th, you're going to win the Mega Millions with these numbers. Fantastic. And I was just like, well, for whatever reason, I don't want that to be laid out that way. And I'm like, I'm just not going to do anything. I'm just going to like be a recluse and I'm not going to go anywhere until January 25th. That, the moment Melanie told me that, and the fact that I was like, no, I'm not going to do that, was already laid out, and I wasn't going to do it anyway, and I wasn't going to win the Mega Millions anyway. So like, it was like, you think you're stopping something, but it's still unfolding the way that it's supposed to unfold. And that, my dear, is why I am not a philosopher. I am currently incapable of fully perceiving time that way, so I don't have to answer those questions. That's it's above me now.
Literally.
And I think that's where, faith just has to come in, and believing in the things that we cannot see. For instance, we talked a little bit about jumping timelines. There's a belief that you can jump into a timeline that's for your highest good, particularly for you. Because remember, there's infinite timelines. So I can jump into a timeline where nothing else changes for the rest of the world except I am a Grammy Award winning songwriter. I don't know. I just made that up. But through sheer will alone, that you can be in the timeline for your highest good. If you would like to practice that and see where that goes, you can just do the affirmation of I am in the timeline for my highest good. So experiment with that. Life is an experiment. See where that takes you.
Yeah, I love that affirmation. I think about it as the multiverse is like this decision tree, and basically with each passing moment, there's a different inflection point that I can take this path or that path. And so that's where the free will comes in. It's like, I can go left or right on the decision tree, but it's all happening somewhere. Like, each decision is simultaneously happening, but in a different timeline. So that's kind of how I try to help myself go to sleep at night, because I'll stay thinking about these things until 3 a.m. So that's how I conceptualize it.
All right. Well, we ran out of time for the time episode. But before we go, we did want to remind you all to sign up for our mailing list at chakrasandshotguns.com. We sent out the first newsletter a few days ago and gave some tips on how to work with the Lunar New Year energy. So if you missed that, make sure you go sign up to get future tips, because By the time you listen to this episode, Lunar New Year has passed. And finally, if you're loving the show, please subscribe and give us 5 stars wherever you listen.
Namaste.